Welcome to the Anton Stentner podcast. Today we got a juicy topic because we're going to have a discussion and dive deep into who is going to be better for real estate, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. Anton, break it down on what people can expect today from today's podcast related to this topic.
So what we're going to do is went and did research on their policies, what they've done in the past, things like that. And we're just going to give them a scorecard. Like, oh, you get a point for that? Nah, you get a 0 for that, or you lose a point for that. And we'll kind of go through each one of these. I'm sure we'll miss one, but we did give Kamala or Trump a point or a score on each item. So if we miss something, hit us in the comments, or if you think you want to disagree, hey, hit us in the comments too. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
And of course, because I know everybody's going to be friendly when it comes to the topic of politics, I just wanted to disclose that my position in terms of this podcast is to bring out all the facts and also represent maybe a different side of it, perspective. Not because of my beliefs, but just because I want it to be as fair as possible. So we're going to go through every single one of these points. And at the end, I'm just going to ask questions that might just surface different perspectives.
Love it.
But not because it relates to what I believe, but because I really do want the best answer, because I do care about this. I think a lot of other people too. And what's funny about this topic, if you think about it, it's not being reported on.
No.
But it is the number one financial decision people will make. And arguably, it's the biggest part of your net worth. And of course, everyone's talking about groceries and inflation. But I would say more people care about this than it's being reported on. So I'm excited to hear all these policies and all the points, and then to make a prediction of who real estate will be affected in a positive way by.
I love it. Okay, so let's start with the infrastructure investment. So under the Biden administration, we had $1.2 trillion in infrastructure investment. Under the bipartisan, so Congress voted on this, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. What's interesting is I'm going to give Kamala a +1 on this, even though I think we did a lot of overspending. And I'm going to give Trump a 0 on this. And I'll get to why here in just a second. One, the reason she gets a +1 is infrastructure is about roads. It's about transportation. It's about broadband. It's about energy. All of that does go to create a strong economy, a strong, stable foundation. And that is what we need for housing for the long term. I'm giving Trump a 0 because he didn't really have much in this particular one. Where I think it fails miserably is it's failing miserably in just the sheer overspending. And I'm going to just give 2 examples here. There was about $50 billion, that's with a B, that was set aside for charging stations and broadband. Out of that, there's $7.5 billion that's supposed to go to charging stations. And this is the prime example of government waste. So that in 2 years has only produced 8 charging stations.
Oh my gosh.
Just wait, bro. It gets worse. And so we have $42 billion set aside for rural broadband. And since then, and you can go check this out, Brendan Carr of the FCC says it's been 1,072 days since this has been put into act. How many people have been connected in a rural area because of broadband? Guess, how many?
Oh, I want to say 25,000?
0.
Oh. 25 would have been bad too, because that's not a huge part of the population. So that's like one city.
So I'm still giving her a 1 on this because of the infrastructure, because of roads, transportation, stuff like that. I'm giving Trump a 0 because he wasn't involved in this one. But I want to say this is massive government waste and government overspending that I don't really like. One thing we have to really be thinking about. As the government overspends, what does that do to rates? Does it help us or does it hurt us?
Well, I'm assuming it hurts us because it's unneeded injection of cash that doesn't create anything. So it just inflates for the sake of inflating.
So freaking close.
It's like $100 hammer
Yes.
at a Home Depot or $1,000 hammer Pentagon. Right?
Exactly. What I want people thinking about is if the government is spending and they're going into debt, then what's happening is it's harder for the U.S. government to borrow because they have so much debt, which raises all of our interest rates, which hurts real estate. Okay, so that's kind of one of the underlying premises here. Next, we got clean energy or climate change. Kamala is very pro-clean energy, we positioned the U.S. via the Inflation Reduction Act for a bunch of climate change stuff to get us moving in the clean energy space. That doesn't necessarily help us in housing. It actually slows housing down. But because I like the infrastructure, we're only going to give her a 0 on this one. Trump supports the rollback of some of these energy tax credits and is pro-business and not as pro-climate change. So I'm going to give him +1 on this one because that's going to help business. So I want to give everyone a specific example. Energy codes in Washington State have just increased. And climate change is good because it's happening. We've got to take care of the climate in the future. We've got to make it available for future generations. We've got to make sure we have good water, good clean air. Conversely, we have to do things in an economical fashion. So the average price of a home in Washington State for under 1,500 square feet due to the new energy credits costs about an extra $25,000 to build. If it's over 1,500 square feet here in the Seattle metro, that's about $42,000 for about a 2,500 square foot home. Did the buyer get $25,000 to $42,000 worth of value?
Probably not.
No. Are they getting that in their energy bill? No. But they're getting a little bit higher efficiency, but not necessarily almost 50 grand worth of efficiency versus the cost.
It's like they're taxing people.
It's like they're taxing people. It's like we're building regulation that shouldn't necessarily be there. Once again, Kamala got a 0, Trump got a 1. Middle class tax credit relief. I love this idea. Kamala's pushing this more than Trump. She gets a +1. Helping the middle class helps real estate. The middle class is our first-time home buyer. The middle class is the move-up buyer. That's the meat of the market. So this is a big +1 in my book because I'm so pro-middle class. Trump does not mention any large middle class tax credits, so I give him a -1 in this case. Now, they both talk about expanding child tax credits. So it's kind of a teeter-totter. Neither one of them totally wins. I believe the expanding of child tax credits is very beneficial because what it does, it comes back to people on their tax return, gives them more money, allows them to have more kids, more stable society, more housing. Very pro this, but because they both support it, hey, Harris, you get a 0. Donald, you get a 0. Okay, now we're moving into corporation tax and tax the rich. Corporations. So this started with the rhetoric in the Biden administration. So we're just going to call it Bidenomics. And it's definitely continuing into the Harris administration of taxing the rich, aka people who make over $400,000, and taxing corporations. Well, people who make over $400,000 a year, do they own more or less real estate than people who make less than 4?
Oh, they probably own more.
Bingo. So if we tax an income bracket that is a big part of driving the market, of owning rental properties, that brings down their incentive to purchase it. And if we tax corporations more, we have less corporate spending, less goods being created for consumers. And because we're a consumer economy, then we have consumers spending less money because there's less goods at an affordable price. So this is a -2 in the Kamala Harris camp. And both candidates talk about cutting taxes on tips. So we're going to give them a 0 on both sides. Trump mentioned it first. It caught fire. Kamala hops on board and says, you know what? Let's cut taxes on tips too. Part of what I don't like here, Benji, is some of this is just policy or things they want to do. It doesn't mean it's going to actually happen. And so before you yell at me in the comments or yell at someone else in the comments, our subscribers, we have a tolerance for everyone. We want to hear different opinions and ideas. Please share them, but be respectful. Okay. Trump wants to lower corporate taxes to 15%. Well, buddy boy, I got to give him a +1. More tax cuts or making tax cuts permanent. I got to give him a +1. Elimination of taxes on Social Security, another +1. Why am I giving him so many points on this? People on Social Security or who have Social Security benefits buy real estate. If you've already paid taxes, and this is just a personal feeling, if you've already paid taxes on the money and you gave it to the government for a retirement plan, they shouldn't tax you to hand it back to you. That's like double taxation. So that rubs me business-wise the wrong way. Don't know if that one's going to super help, but lowering tax cuts and making tax cuts permanent, yes. Corporate tax cuts, yes. The problem with the making tax cuts permanent, I got to give one to the Harris camp on this. So she also gets a +1 because part of this, if these tax cuts are permanent, it means federal spending will be sitting at a higher amount, which is more deficit spending currently.
And not efficient spending.
So next, one of Harris's policies is strengthening of labor unions and raising the federal minimum wage. I'm very moderate, and I believe that this is semi-inflationary. However, raising the federal minimum wage is good for housing. If more people are making more money, they can afford housing because where are we at with affordability? We've talked about this a bunch. Does affordability suck right now or is it good?
Horribly.
Affordability is the worst it's been since the early 80s. Okay, so wages have to go up even if that's inflationary. So we give her a +1. Trump does not mention this. Good old Donald, you get a -1, brother man. Supply chain resilience. So COVID really started this. We started noticing the fact that we're so dependent on other countries, the fact that we're so dependent on these just in time. So Trump started it, the Biden administration continued it, this idea of reshoring manufacturing, reshoring jobs, restabilizing our supply chain. I give both of them a +1 on this because I think that's really, really good for the U.S. The bad, which kind of hurts us in real estate, and I want everyone thinking about this, is reshoring, bringing manufacturing home, is inflationary. That means this is one of those things that could cause rates to be higher for longer, which means goods and services may cost more in the future, which means we may have to figure out ways to reshore, maybe also in Mexico, maybe also with Canada, and form those economic alliances just so they're closer, but not necessarily in the U.S. So that one's good, but it is semi-inflationary. This one pisses me off. So my dad was grew up a farmer in Eastern Washington. And so I was taught my whole life, listeners, that you need to be able to rub 2 pennies together and turn them into a nickel. And you should be able to fix anything. And I can't, but you should be able to. And that you should be able to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and don't waste and build something not just for today, but for tomorrow. Because farmers, they think in decades, they think in generations. Our current government is not thinking in generations. We are headed towards the fiscal Titanic with our current level of debt. So they're talking about it in regards to fiscal responsibility and inflation control. Everyone gets -1 on this. They both suck. One sucks worse than the other. So this just came out 2 days ago. U.S. national debt increased by $473 billion over the last 3 weeks. It now stands at $35.8 trillion. That's $103,700 for every American. And if you look at that graph right there where they circled it, you can see that's the jump in the last 3 weeks.
What is that jump from?
I think that is the restarting of our fiscal year where the budget starts again. And so a bunch of new spending immediately kicks in.
But this is so massive compared to
It's
the rest of it.
$473 billion.
That's crazy.
It's really crazy. So, should we blame Republicans? Should we blame Democrats? Should we blame Donald Trump? Should we blame Kamala Harris or Joe Biden? We should blame all of them. During the Trump administration, our federal debt was increased by $5.85 trillion, minus one Trump. During the Biden administration, and once again, it looks like the Harris camp is adopting Biden economics. You have to assume this is going to continue. The Biden administration is projected to finish at an additional $8.85 trillion, or roughly $3 trillion more than the Trump administration. So they both spent too much. They're equally to blame. The problem is, no one in Congress is willing to do this, but we're going to have to pay for it. Our kids are going to have to pay for it. Our great-great-grandkids are going to have to pay for it. Next item on the list. Kamala does not support tariffs. Trump does. Trump buddy, I'm sorry. You get a -2 on this one. Yeah, I'm pretty opposed to these tariffs because tariffs, once again, this is the lens of real estate. If we have a 20% tariff on foreign goods and up to a 60% tariff on things from China, what we're doing is we're making those things cost more in a consumer-based economy, which means less spending, which means rates go up, which means less purchasing, buying, selling of real estate, less transactions. I don't like these tariffs. I think they may be necessary to fight back some of the foreign powers that we've given too much power to. We shouldn't have given every bit of manufacturing to China. It's awesome to see us bring in things like the semiconductor chips, like they're doing with that big factory there in Arizona. But these tariffs, not good for real estate. Okay, war and defense. On defense, I feel they're both about the same. Neither one's going to dramatically affect real estate. Kamala appears to be following in Joe's footsteps. And Mr. Biden has definitely been pro-war during his whole political career. I'm assuming she is. It's hard to find where she stands politically on a lot of these things. So you have to mirror and match kind of, well, what was Joe doing? Versus Trump was very anti-war. Wars are not good for real estate. Okay? So
why is it not good for real estate?
Because when we get into a war or someone else is in a war that we're giving money to, if we're giving money to them, the federal deficit's going up, which hurts our borrowing ability. If we're in the war, everyone is scared, transactions go down, rates may or may not go down depending on the total geopolitical conflict. So the moral of the story, Trump, because you're anti-war, you get a +1, and Kamala, you get a -1 on this, assuming you're like Joe. But we don't know. That wasn't the annoying part of doing the research on this was I could find all kinds of stuff that Donald had already said, where he was in the public eye, where the Trump campaign was putting something out there. I cannot find the same amount of information for the Harris campaign. So if I've said something correctly, feel free to beat me up in the comments. You won't hurt my feeling. I'm just asking you to be nice to the other people. Kamala wants to end price gouging, ban grocery store price increases, food price increases, ways to address inflation, to cap off prescription drug prices. Both of them kind of mention prescription drugs, so you kind of throw that one out the window, okay? Because both of them are a little bit pissed off about pharma, and I think we all should be. However, if you go back and look at history and you look at anything that is any type of a price fixing thing, generally speaking, what that's done is it's driven down competition, it's increased prices, it's made the quantity of the product available less and the quality less. Price fixing has never worked. And so Kamala, you get a -1, and Trump doesn't mention it, so you get a 0. Healthcare. It's really interesting. She says she wants to build on the Affordable Care Act. Do you pay for health insurance for your family?
Yes, I do.
What happened when the Affordable Care Act passed to your
Nothing.
health insurance? Did it go up or down?
Oh, it definitely went up.
Bingo. The Affordable Care Act caused my health insurance to go up 34%.
It just keeps going up from here. But I also have 5 kids, so that might be part of the factor. I don't know how that works.
I got three. But so the Affordable Care Act, she wants to add to it, and it's a -1 on my book. Trump says he wants to attack it, and it's a -1. Why? Healthcare is a drain on the system in the United States. We have to fundamentally fix it. We have to make it fundamentally cheaper. And I believe that negatively impacts real estate because of the sheer cost. Both of them get a -1. So this one, you're going to hear a little personal bias. Kamala says, or the Harris camp says, they want to strengthen voting rights through the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act, which protects and will expand early voting and voting by mail. Trump's on the other side of this, and he wants to implement stricter voting policies with IDs and proof of citizenship. I'm going to be really honest and blunt. It wouldn't matter to me, Republican, Democrat, pink fluffy unicorn party. I'm very much for stricter voting policies. When you go to the bank and you open up a bank account, you have to give them your ID, you prove who you are, they check. For all of my entities, I'm now having to send the government documentation about your LLCs or your Inc. to prove who you are because the IRS wants to be able to find you and audit you. But yet, to vote in our political system, in the greatest country on earth, with the most technology, we couldn't implement a more secure voter system with maybe biometrics or some sort of tokenomics and some sort of ID, and it couldn't happen instantly. Come on. I'm sick of Republicans playing the game with voter stuff because I guarantee they do it. I'm sick of Democrats playing the voter game with voter rolls and that stuff. I want an even playing field where everyone just has to do the same thing. So the Donald campaign gets +1, Kamala gets -1 because I'm very much for stricter guidelines because of just things I have to go through in my own life. I went through TSA last week. I guess that wasn't last week. That was like 3 weeks ago. And as I'm coming back through, there's food in my bag. And I have like TSA pre-check. So I'm a known quantity. They pull the food out of my bag to make sure I'm not something different than the known quantity. Why don't do the same thing for voters? Just double check. It's not that freaking hard. Okay, next. Now we're going to move into some housing specific stuff. First-time homebuyer assistance. Kamala had proposed that $25,000 credit. This is horrible idea. If we give $25,000 to every first-time homebuyer, you just raise the price of every home in America, 25 to 50 grand. Bad idea. Kamala -1. Trump, you didn't say anything about it. You get a 0. Increase home building by 3 million units. This is Kamala's idea. I love it, but this is laughable. There's no way you're going to increase home building by 3 million units without massive change in government bureaucracy, without getting rid of half of the government in regards to permitting, land use, red tape, without installing massive AI and just taking out the human element of building, land development, and regulation.
Also, you can look at the track record. If they built 8 gas stations or whatever, electrical charging stations.
Yes. 8 EV charging stations.
How many were they supposed to build?
Doesn't matter. They have 7.5 billion.
It's like, I don't even know. I don't know anything about building electrical charging stations, but I imagine a private company, maybe even Tesla, could probably build way more, way faster. And by the way, it's not even a judgment on their ability to build those, but like electrical charging stations and housing, The problem is the red tape.
Bingo.
It's literally the government.
Well, it's totally the red tape. So they haven't delivered any of the broadband like we talked about. And so there's like 131 million households in the US. And let's assume 60 million of them are rural. Well, you could just take 42 billion divided by 60 million and you could probably afford to give everyone Starlink in the rural area and not even have to go lay the broadband.
Well, you would make Elon a trillionaire.
I don't care. I care about government efficiency.
Hey, good for him. He built something that is valuable to people. And just to finish this point, though, about this, without you even finishing it, this one is fairly objective in terms of the judgment on these two, because Kamala Harris says she wants to build 3 million units, right? And then we know part of the reason why that's unrealistic is because of the red tape, the permitting, the regulations.
We've talked about it on other episodes.
Yeah. And she has made some comments, to be fair, like, hey, we need to make it easier.
Yes.
But Trump has been gun-ho. It's like, we just want to get rid of all the regulations.
Well,
you know?
And we'll go there because that's further down the list, but it's perfect to insert right now.
Yeah.
Kamala did say she wants to lower the regulation. Okay, so Kamala gets a +1. Trump says, hey, Elon, what'd you do over there at Twitter? Elon goes, homeboy, I just fired 80% of the workforce and made it run more efficiently. And so the joke was that Elon is going to, if Trump wins, is going to start the DOGE, the Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency, and focus on making the government more efficient. If the government was just 10% more efficient. So think about where we're at right now. We're running an extra $1 trillion every 90 days. 10% more efficient is $100 billion every 90 days. That's $400 billion less just in the deficit in 1 year by a 10% change in efficiency. So she gets a +1 on that because you got Elon in the background. Trump gets a +2.
Did we jump forward a little bit?
We did jump forward a little bit.
Okay, got it.
Because I just wanted to throw that one in there. This one, I'm going to give it to her. This is like a slam dunk, and I don't understand how. I think the Trump campaign missed this opportunity. Kamala's talking about providing tax incentives to home builders that build affordable housing units. Now, I want to make one thing clear. I hate the word affordable housing. I want attainable home ownership. Attainable home ownership to me is first-time home buyers can afford to buy a home, and it's a strong middle class. Our current class system is dividing. So I want strong middle class. I don't know if she can do it, but I'm giving her a +1. Trump did not mention anything on that one, so he gets a -1. Next, rental caps for corporate landlords. Once again, this is just one of those political talking points. All you have to do is go anywhere in the U.S. and look at where they've instituted rental caps and ask yourself, did the quality of the rentals go up or down? Did the amount of available rentals go up or down? And then what happened to prices? And here's what's happened. You can go look at New York. You can look at multiple cities who have done some type of rental cap. The quality of the product goes down. The number of available units goes down. The level of maintenance goes down. And the cost goes up. Because what happens is whatever the maximum rate is that they can increase, they just automatically increase it by that. What happens, though, when there is the supply and demand game, and this is what's happening across the U.S. right now, is supply will get a little bit high, which naturally pulls down rents or slows down the rent growth. Well, if you put an artificial cap on them, people build less rentals, they buy less rentals, so the supply never comes, so that there's never that oversupply to pull down on the rents. So Harris -1, Trump, you get a 0 he didn't mention it, so it's not negative, not positive. Last but not least, out of the two of them, which owns real estate, quite a bit of it, and has run businesses, and which one doesn't?
I mean, Trump was famous for all his books about real estate, all the buildings he has. His name is on so many different properties. Regardless of, this highs and lows, he's definitely got more experience.
Bingo.
And what do you know about Kamala? I mean, just if you were to compare their history, well, she was in government most of the time, and that wasn't specializing in real estate for sure. So, I mean, he wins by a landslide on that.
By a landslide. So in her career, she's never been forced to sign the front of the check. In her career, she's never been forced to be massively efficient and operate on her own dollars. And so therefore, I have to give her a -1 on this, and we have to give him a +1. And so did you total it up?
I did.
I actually didn't total this up.
Yep.
So looks like we're ending with Kamala at a -3 and Trump at a +6, or a total differential or a point spread of 9. I'm probably a little biased because he's a real estate guy. I mean, let's be honest about this. And so what are your thoughts? What did I miss here? Steelman this for me. What's the other side, or where
I
are
thought
we
it was
missing?
it was very fair. I mean, I was even surprised early on Trump was kind of behind because of some of the policies that the Biden-Harris campaign put into place. And, I think ultimately, if I simplify all of this, I look at Kamala being in government for so long as a negative, generally speaking, because the government hasn't been known to solve a lot of problems. They might run the country. We've got a strong government or military, but man, our experience as real estate investors, you're a real estate professional. I've never looked at our governments, both local and national, and thought, man, they're really making it easier for us to build houses, to buy homes. Now, in terms of the lending side, for sure, but then there's been some consequences there.
Yeah.
Two times now, big ones.
Yeah.
And so she kind of is attached to that identity and that authority and that history. For him, it's like been almost all real estate, if you think about it. And then also he's been so pro-business. So that's like the simple way of putting it. But you mentioned this, both ultimately are politicians, right? Her as a vice president, trying to be president, right? And everything she's done before. Him as a previous president and wanting to be president. Still, like, the tool that they're going to use is government. And so I think that we probably more than ever that it's private citizens, private businesses and home builders that will fix a problem, because the number one thing about home prices is lack of inventory.
Lack of inventory.
And so
massive lack of inventory.
Exactly. And so when I'm thinking about who would be closest to understand this, it's just Trump.
Yeah.
So, and remember, this podcast and this discussion has nothing to do with who we want to win or lose. This is literally, we're just super focused on real estate because that's what this podcast is about. And that's kind of what my takeaway was. I was surprised actually on the score because for whatever reason, I thought it would be even greater.
Yeah.
But I love that you brought up all the policies in Harris's, campaign that maybe a lot of people don't understand, right?
Yeah.
Because I guess my last question is, can you just quickly summarize, based off of what you just said, how you landed on this outside of the numbers and where you see both campaigns going if either candidate won?
Oh, that's a really good question. Okay, so if I was to summarize this, what I would say is that Harris has some good ideological ideas that are hard to implement. And unfortunately, because of her long-term track record in government, there's a lot of spending associated with those ideas that are somewhat more ideological than actual, I can get this done. And what we saw from the infrastructure bill and the spending examples of them not delivering broadband to anyone and them only delivering 8 EV chargers for the cost of $50 billion, it brings down my hopes of success. However, where she talks about this idea of cutting red tape, of incentivizing builders, any way you look at it, the way to fix the housing problem is build more housing. I actually don't care what housing type it is. You got to build more housing. If we had more housing, it would be more affordable. Plain and simple. I just don't believe she has a strong enough track record and a business background in order to get that done. Okay, let's go over to Trump. Trump has a track record and a history of just pissing people off. And what happens is he's unpresidential. I don't like the way he talks. He's gruff. He's insulting. He's this. And then our media has also vilified the individual at a level that I've never seen in my lifetime, where we all of a sudden have multiple assassination attempts against a presidential candidate, which I thought would never happen because of the level he's been vilified for. I don't know that he's as evil as everyone makes him out to be. Now, when we spin that over to housing, I hate the tariff idea. I don't like some of his other ideas. I think he needs to support the middle class a little more. And he's pro-business, he's pro-housing, pro-economy, pro-U.S., anti-war, pro-close the border. All of that is very good for housing. And so that's where I look at it and I go, okay, I have to, if I'm looking at just from that, he's going to win. Now if Harris wins or if Trump wins, let's just go there, okay? If Harris wins, what we're probably going to experience is a slightly higher taxation environment, more government regulation, a more of an open border policy, the potential of more conflict, aka war, and we're going to have someone who has not been in high-level politics for a long time or not run a lot of something, run the U.S. That's a little bit scary for me. Regardless of all that, your strategy will be to figure out how you could create tax-advantaged situations in a high-taxed environment, for how you could, if she is giving credits for affordable housing, how you could capitalize on those credits. Or if she does incentivize the first-time home buyer, how you could then build first-time home buyer product or deliver that, or create those affordable rentals. And so whatever happens in that campaign, it's like they give you the rule book. Once they give you the rule book, you just got to read the book. And whatever the rule book says, we'll manage around it. We'll figure it out. Okay? I'm actually not worried. I'm not moving to Mexico if one president gets elected versus the other. And people that act like that, come on, grow up. Now, if Trump wins, I have some apprehensions and there's some positives. The apprehensions is if those tariffs get installed too quickly, I believe that could be very inflationary and that could cause inflation to rear its ugly head and cause rates to stay higher for longer, which hurts our industry. I believe over the long run, the implementation of or more tax cuts, so either getting the existing tax cuts locked in longer or the implementation of additional tax cuts will benefit the growth of our economy, especially as we're going through this AI revolution. And the idea of lowering government regulation, lowering government red tape, the DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, and bringing in Elon and other outside professionals to look at it and say, how do we streamline this and cut the fat? Because you can't have $42 billion and deliver zero broadband. Come on, just freaking give everyone Starlink. It's quicker, faster, cheaper. And we also can't have this current regulatory environment where the Biden-Harris administration is attacking businesses that don't agree with them politically. And we've really limited mergers and acquisitions. We have to unlimit mergers and acquisitions, not to the point where monopolies get out of control. But people sometimes forget that some of the crazy things these giant entities build is because they have cash to burn. And if you want to be a global superpower, you got to let them cook. You got to let them sit there and make things and acquire the next great entity. And you got to allow venture capital come in and spill it into something and make a multiple. Because if they can't do that, we don't get to deliver the next amazing revolution that we need. Because we need the AI revolution because we're 35 trillion in debt like we just talked about. So we've got to figure out a way, a balance of taxation, of government spending, of government efficiency, and growing the economy bigger than it is because our federal spending is so large. Like I'm more worried about the federal debt than I am who wins the election. And because I think the federal debt affects our long-term borrowing capability. And like we've talked about on many episodes, all of you that are hanging out with us, you know this. If it's harder for the U.S. to borrow, most of real estate is based off the 10-year treasury, which is U.S. debt. If it's harder for us to borrow, the 10-year treasury goes up. Therefore, the cost to borrow for all real estate goes up. This is just freaking math. That's how the maths. That's the bigger concern, not who wins. However, if we're looking just at real estate, Trump has a 9-point advantage in helping us on the real estate sector. He's a real estate guy. Duh. I mean, that's not that hard.
Plus, he works at McDonald's.
Plus, he works at McDonald's.
Did you know, a fun fact, McDonald's is, I think, the #2 owner of real estate. So maybe there's some connection there.
There's definitely some connection. If you go back and watch that movie, Kroc, where they talk about, what they did and who Ray Kroc was and how he went to the McDonald's brothers and how basically he sold a model and then bought real estate. And that's what made McDonald's so powerful. What does Starbucks try to do? Be on every corner. Location, location, location. So there's so many real estate plays, and I think, though, that we've started an AI revolution, and we've got to let corporate America have those mergers, acquisitions, let the AI cook, let our GDP expand. We're too far in debt to slow things down right now.
Let the president cook, too.
Let the president cook.
All right.
Thank you guys for hanging out with us. Leave us your comments below and subscribe. Share this with a friend. You guys can argue in the comments. Let's rock and roll.